Welcome to today's journey through one of humanity's most extraordinary survival stories. Picture this. 70,000 years ago, a small group of humans stands at the edge of the African continent, staring into an unknown world of ice, desert, and danger. They possess no maps, no written knowledge, no technology beyond stone tools and fire. Yet somehow, these first nomads will conquer every environment on Earth. From the frozen Arctic to scorching deserts, from mountain peaks to tropical rainforests. How did they do it? This is not just a story of survival, it's the greatest adventure in human history. These early nomads faced predators that could tear them apart in seconds, temperature swings that could kill in hours, and landscapes so hostile that death lurked behind every decision. They had no supermarkets, no weather forecasts, no emergency services. Every day was a calculated risk, every season a test of ingenuity and endurance. Today, we're going to uncover the secrets of how our ancestors mastered the planet's most extreme environments. We'll discover the ingenious strategies they developed, the incredible adaptations they made, and the sheer determination that allowed them to thrive where no human had ever set foot before. From the development of clothing to the domestication of fire, from the creation of shelters to the reading of stars, we'll explore the innovations that transformed vulnerable primates into the world's ultimate survivors. Prepare yourself for an epic journey across continents and millennia as we answer the question: how did the first nomads survive Earth's harshest climates? Chapter 1. The African Cradle. The story begins in East Africa, approximately 300,000 years ago, where Homo sapiens emerges in a landscape that is neither fully forest nor fully savanna, but a complex mosaic of both. The Great Rift Valley stretches like a scar across the continent, its volcanic soil rich with nutrients, its lakes teeming with life. Here, in this ecological paradise, early humans developed the fundamental traits that will later allow them to conquer the world. They walk upright, freeing their hands for tool use. They develop larger brains, capable of complex planning and abstract thought. They create social bonds that allow cooperation on unprecedented scales. But this African homeland is not the harsh testing ground that will forge humanity into the ultimate nomadic species. That crucible lies ahead, beyond the familiar boundaries of the continent. Around 70,000 years ago, something dramatic happens. The climate shifts and Africa becomes drier, cooler, and more unpredictable. Some scientists believe a massive volcanic eruption, the Toba supereruption in what is now Indonesia, plunges the world into a volcanic winter, dropping global temperatures by as much as 15 degrees Celsius. The effect on Africa is catastrophic. Forests shrink, water sources dry up, and animal populations collapse. Humanity faces a bottleneck. Genetic evidence suggests our population crashes to perhaps as few as 10,000 individuals. In this moment of crisis, some groups make a fateful decision. They will leave Africa and venture into the unknown lands beyond. The first migrations out of Africa follow the coastlines, a strategy that makes perfect sense for a species that knows how to gather shellfish and catch fish. Small bands of perhaps 20 to 50 individuals move slowly along the shores of the Red Sea, crossing into the Arabian Peninsula during a period when sea levels are lower and the crossing is possible. These pioneers discover a world utterly different from their African home. The Arabian Peninsula, now mostly desert, is then a landscape of grasslands and seasonal lakes. But it represents the first taste of environmental variability that these nomads will encounter. As these groups move eastward along the coasts of the Indian Ocean, they adapt rapidly to new food sources. They learn which coastal plants are edible, which shellfish are safe to eat, which fish can be speared in shallow waters. But the coast is not the only route out of Africa. Other groups move northward through the Levant, into what is now Israel and Syria. Here they encounter the first truly harsh climate. The winters are cold, the summers scorching, and the landscape offers different challenges than the tropical African environment they have left behind. These early nomads possess a toolkit that seems primitive by modern standards, but represents millions of years of accumulated knowledge. They carry fire with them, keeping embers alive in containers made from shells or hollow wood. They know how to knap stone into razor-sharp blades and points. They understand animal behavior well enough to hunt effectively. They can read the landscape for signs of water and food. Most importantly, they possess language, the ability to share knowledge, plan for the future, and pass information across generations. This last trait proves to be the most powerful survival tool of all. The journey out of Africa is not a single exodus, but a series of waves, each group leaving at different times, following different routes, facing different challenges. Some groups fail and disappear into the mists of prehistory, leaving only fragmentary remains in archaeological sites. Others succeed spectacularly, founding populations that will eventually spread across entire continents. The key to their success lies not in physical strength or individual prowess, but in flexibility, creativity, and cooperation. When they encounter a new environment, they experiment, observe, and adapt. They watch what animals eat and try those foods themselves. They note where animals shelter and adopt similar strategies. They share innovations within their groups and pass successful techniques to their children. By 60,000 years ago, human populations have established themselves throughout the Middle East and are pushing further into Asia. These groups are no longer African in any meaningful sense. They have adapted to new climates, new foods, new challenges. They are becoming true nomads, people for whom movement is not just occasional, but a way of life. They follow game animals across vast distances, track seasonal resources, and develop an intimate knowledge of the lands they traverse. They are learning the fundamental truth that will define human success for millennia. Adaptability is everything. The physical changes that accompany this adaptation are subtle but significant. Groups moving into northern latitudes begin to develop lighter skin, an adaptation that allows more efficient vitamin D production in regions with less intense sunlight. Body proportions shift slightly, with populations in colder climates developing stockier builds that conserve heat more efficiently. But these biological adaptations are slow, taking thousands of generations. The real key to survival lies in cultural adaptation, the knowledge, tools, and strategies that can be learned and improved within a single generation. As these first nomads spread across Asia, they demonstrate remarkable ingenuity. In the grasslands of Central Asia, they learned to follow vast herds of horses and woolly mammoths, predicting their movements with increasing accuracy. In the forests of Southeast Asia, they mastered the art of hunting in dense vegetation, developing new techniques for tracking and trapping. Along rivers and lakes, they become expert fishermen, creating nets, weirs, and hooks from natural materials. Each new environment demands new solutions, and each solution represents a small victory of human ingenuity over environmental challenge. The archaeological record from this period is frustratingly sparse, but what survives tells a story of increasing sophistication. Stone tools become more specialized, with different designs for different purposes. Evidence of long-distance trade appears, with obsidian and other valuable materials traveling hundreds of kilometers from their sources. Burial sites suggest increasingly complex belief systems and social structures. Art begins to appear simple decorations on tools at first, then more elaborate designs carved into bone and stone. These early nomads are not simply surviving. They are creating culture, meaning, and beauty in a world that often seems hostile to all three. By 50,000 years ago, humans have reached Australia, a feat that requires crossing significant stretches of open ocean, even when sea levels are at their lowest. This migration represents a quantum leap in human capability. These nomads have become seafarers, able to construct vessels capable of carrying entire families across dangerous waters. The skills required for this achievement, navigation, boat building, cooperation, planning, demonstrate just how far humanity has come from its African origins. The first Australians will go on to develop one of the longest-lasting continuous cultures in human history, adapting brilliantly to the unique challenges of the island continent. The stage is now set for humanity's greatest challenge yet. To the north lie the frozen wastes of Ice Age Europe and Asia, environments more hostile than anything encountered so far. To master these landscapes, the nomads will need to develop entirely new strategies, technologies, and ways of life. The harsh climates that await them will forge humanity into something unprecedented, a species that can thrive anywhere on Earth. Chapter 2. Mastering Fire. Fire transforms everything. This simple statement captures the single most important technological achievement in human history, the innovation that makes survival in harsh climates not just possible, but sustainable. Yet fire is not a human invention. Lightning strikes have created wildfires for hundreds of millions of years, long before humans walked the earth. What makes fire revolutionary is not its existence, but humanity's control of it, the ability to create fire at will, maintain it indefinitely, and harness its power for countless purposes. This mastery represents the first time any species consciously controls a force of nature, and it changes the equation of survival in fundamental ways. The earliest evidence of controlled fire use dates back at least 400,000 years, possibly much earlier. Archaeological sites in Kenya, Israel, and China show hearths, charred bones, and burned stones that could not have resulted from natural wildfires. But there is a crucial difference between using fire opportunistically, keeping alive flames from a lightning strike, and creating fire on demand. The latter requires understanding the chemistry of combustion, knowledge of which materials work as tinder and fuel, and the physical techniques to generate the initial spark or ember. Early humans developed multiple methods. The bow drill, which uses friction to create heat, striking flint against iron pyrite to create sparks, and the hand drill, a simpler but more exhausting technique. Each method requires practice, skill, and the right materials, making fire-making knowledge a precious commodity that defines the success or failure of nomadic groups. For nomads venturing into cold climates, fire becomes absolutely essential for survival. The human body is adapted to tropical conditions. We lack the thick fur of Arctic mammals, the insulating blubber of seals, or the metabolic adaptations of animals that hibernate through winter. Without external heat sources, humans exposed to temperatures below freezing face hypothermia and death within hours. Fire solves this thermal challenge in multiple ways. It provides direct warmth, allowing humans to survive nights when temperatures plummet. It creates microclimates around camps, raising ambient temperatures by several degrees. It dries wet clothing and gear, preventing the deadly combination of moisture and cold. Most importantly, it gives nomadic groups a mobile source of heat that they can carry with them, recreating the warmth of Africa wherever they go. But fire's benefits extend far beyond simple warmth. Cooking food with fire is perhaps equally revolutionary. Raw meat and plant materials are often difficult to digest, containing toxins, parasites, and tough cellular structures that resist our digestive systems. Fire changes this. Cooking kills pathogens, breaks down tough fibers, and releases nutrients that would otherwise pass through our bodies unutilized. Archaeological evidence suggests that cooking may have enabled the evolution of smaller jaws and teeth in early humans, as well as contributing to brain expansion. The energy saved on digestion could be diverted to fuel larger, more energy-hungry brains. For nomads in harsh climates where every calorie counts, the ability to extract maximum nutrition from available food becomes a matter of life and death. The nomads also discovered that fire is a powerful tool for manipulating their environment. Controlled burns can drive game animals into kill zones, making hunting more efficient and less dangerous. Fire can clear underbrush, making travel easier and creating clearings where edible plants will grow. It can be used to harden wooden spear points, transforming relatively soft wood into durable, sharp weapons. Smoke from fires keeps insects at bay during summer months, a non-trivial benefit in regions where mosquitoes and biting flies can make life miserable. Firelight extends the useful day, allowing work, socializing, and storytelling to continue after sunset. This last benefit proves culturally crucial. Around the fire, knowledge is shared, traditions are maintained, and social bonds are strengthened. Maintaining fire becomes a central organizing principle of nomadic life. Someone must always tend the flames, feeding fuel, banking coals for the night, protecting the fire from rain and wind. Groups develop sophisticated portable fire-carrying technologies. They learn to keep coals smoldering in specially prepared containers, shells filled with moss, hollow horns stuffed with fungus, clay pots lined with charcoal. These containers allow a group to move with live fire, eliminating the need to create new flames at each camp. The responsibility of firekeeping is serious. Allowing the fire to die in harsh conditions could doom the entire group. Archaeological evidence suggests that some cultures develop specialized firekeeper roles. Individuals trained from childhood in the art of maintaining and transporting flames. The psychological impact of fire cannot be overstated. Predators that would otherwise threaten human camps, cave bears, lions, hyenas, fear fire instinctively. A burning fire creates a safe zone, a bubble of security in a dangerous world. This protection allows humans to sleep more soundly, to lower their guard slightly, to expend less energy on constant vigilance. The light of fire also combats the darkness that must have been psychologically oppressive to early humans. We are diurnal creatures with relatively poor night vision, and the hours of darkness represent vulnerability and danger. Fire pushes back that darkness, creating a visible, tangible barrier against the unknown. As nomadic groups move into increasingly harsh climates, they develop elaborate fire management strategies. In treeless tundra regions, they learn to burn animal dung and bones, materials that seem unpromising but actually burn quite well when properly dried. In areas with limited fuel, they develop ultra-efficient fire designs that maximize heat output while minimizing fuel consumption. They create windbreaks and fire reflectors from stone and packed earth, directing heat where it's needed most. They learn which woods burn hottest, which produce the least smoke, which leave coals that stay hot through the night. This accumulated knowledge represents generations of observation, experimentation, and careful teaching. The social aspects of fire use are equally important. The hearth becomes the center of community life, the place where the group gathers, where meals are shared, where stories are told. Some anthropologists argue that sitting around fires may have contributed to the development of language itself. The need to coordinate fire management, to pass on knowledge about fire making, to warn of fire dangers, all require sophisticated communication. Whether or not fire directly caused language evolution, it certainly creates a context where language flourishes. The nightly gathering around flames becomes a school, a theater, a council chamber, and a church all rolled into one. Fire also enables the creation of more sophisticated tools and technologies. Heating and rapid cooling of stone can improve its flaking properties, making it easier to create sharp edges. Fire can hollow out logs to create boats and containers. It can bend wood into desired shapes for constructing shelters. The ability to heat-treat materials represents a crucial step toward more complex technologies that will emerge later. In this sense, fire is not just a survival tool but a gateway technology that enables countless other innovations. Yet fire also carries dangers. Accidental fires can destroy vast territories, killing game animals and destroying plant resources. Within camps, Fire poses constant risks: burns, smoke inhalation, accidental ignitions of shelters or supplies. Nomadic groups must develop careful protocols for fire safety, teaching children from an early age to respect the flames. The archaeological record contains tragic evidence of fire accidents, burned human remains, destroyed settlements, charred material culture. But the benefits so overwhelmingly outweigh the risks that every successful nomadic group masters fire. Those that don't simply cannot compete and disappear from history. As nomads push into northern Europe and Asia during the Ice Age, fire becomes even more critical. Winter temperatures in these regions regularly drop to -30 or 40 degrees Celsius, cold enough to freeze exposed flesh in minutes. Without fire, survival is simply impossible. These extreme conditions drive innovations in fire management that allow humans to inhabit environments that seem fundamentally unsuited to hairless tropical primates. The mastery of fire represents humanity's first great technological triumph, the innovation that begins our transformation from just another animal into something unprecedented, a species that can remake its environment to suit its needs. Chapter 3: Clothing and Shelter. The humans who venture north into Ice Age Europe around 45,000 years ago confront an environment that seems designed to kill them. Massive ice sheets, kilometers thick, cover Scandinavia and extend south past what is now Berlin. Glaciers carpet the Alps, the Pyrenees, and other mountain ranges. The regions not directly covered by ice experience a periglacial climate: long, brutal winters where temperatures plummet far below freezing, short, cool summers, and a landscape dominated by treeless tundra and cold grasslands known as Mammoth Steppe. Woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, reindeer, horses, and bison roam this steppe in vast herds. But they all possess thick fur, layer of insulating fat, and physiological adaptations to cold that humans entirely lack. How do these nomadic pioneers survive, let alone thrive, in such extreme conditions? The answer lies in humanity's greatest natural advantage: our ability to create artificial solutions to environmental challenges. Unable to grow thick fur, humans create clothing. Unable to hibernate or migrate thousands of kilometers like birds, humans create shelter. Unable to modify their metabolism for cold adaptation, humans modify their environment instead. These innovations represent a revolution in human capability, transforming us from a species tied to warm climates into one that can survive anywhere. The archaeological and genetic evidence for this revolution is both fascinating and fragmentary, requiring us to piece together the story from multiple sources. Clothing leaves almost no archaeological trace. Organic materials like leather, fur, and plant fibers decay rapidly, surviving only in exceptional circumstances. Yet, we can infer the development of clothing from several types of evidence. First, the spread of humans into cold climates itself implies clothing. Naked humans simply cannot survive extended periods in sub-zero temperatures, regardless of fire availability. Second, the evolution of body lice provides a biological clock. Body lice, unlike head lice, live primarily in clothing, and genetic analysis suggests they diverged from head lice approximately 170,000 years ago, indicating that some humans were wearing clothing by that time. Third, the appearance of specialized tools for working: hide scrapers, awls, needles shows increasing sophistication in clothing manufacture. The earliest clothing is probably simple: uncured animal hides draped over the body and held in place with cordage or wooden pins. These garments provide some insulation and wind protection, but are far from ideal. The hides are stiff, crack in cold weather, and become sodden and heavy when wet. But over tens of thousands of years, nomadic groups develop increasingly sophisticated clothing technologies. They learn to cure and soften hides using a variety of techniques, scraping away fat and tissue, treating with animal brains or other natural chemicals, smoking over fires, repeatedly working the leather until it becomes supple. These processes are labor-intensive, requiring hours of work to produce a single garment, but the results are worth it. Soft, durable clothing that can be worn comfortably for months or years. By 25,000 years ago, at the height of the last glacial maximum, when ice sheets reached their greatest extent, some human groups have developed remarkably sophisticated clothing. Archaeological sites in Russia and elsewhere reveal bone needles with tiny eyes, indicating the ability to sew with fine sinew thread. This technology enables tailored clothing garments specifically fitted to the body, with separate pieces for arms, legs, torso, and head. Tailored clothing is vastly superior to simple wraps because it traps warm air more efficiently, moves with the body without restricting movement, and can be layered for maximum insulation. Modern experimental archaeologists who have recreated Ice Age clothing report that properly made fur garments can keep a person comfortable even at -40 degrees, as long as they remain dry. The nomads learned through bitter experience that the greatest danger in cold climates is not cold itself, but moisture. Sweaty clothing loses its insulating properties and can actually accelerate heat loss. Snow that melts against the body and then refreezes can cause frostbite. The solution is sophisticated layering. An inner layer of soft fur worn with the fur side against the skin, absorbing moisture. A middle layer of insulating fur or hide. An outer layer of windproof but breathable material. This same layering principle is used by modern Arctic explorers, though our materials are synthetic rather than natural. The nomads also develop specialized clothing for different conditions, lighter garments for active hunting, heavier ones for sedentary camp activities, waterproof outer layers for wet conditions. Footwear is particularly crucial and particularly challenging. Feet in constant contact with frozen ground lose heat rapidly, and frostbite can cripple a nomad, rendering them unable to travel or hunt. The earliest footwear is probably simple wrapped hides, but these prove inadequate for extended wear in harsh conditions. Over time, nomadic groups develop sophisticated boots waterproof, insulated, and durable enough for long-distance travel. Evidence from Ice Age sites suggests multi-layer boots with grass or fur insulation, sealed seams to keep out moisture, and sturdy soles that can withstand rough terrain. Some groups even create something resembling modern snowshoes, spreading weight over a larger surface area to prevent breaking through crusted snow. But clothing alone is not sufficient for survival through Ice Age winters. Humans also need shelter, protection from wind, precipitation, and the worst of the cold. The nomadic lifestyle complicates shelter construction. Permanent structures make no sense for people constantly on the move. Yet makeshift shelters provide insufficient protection. The solution is portable or rapidly constructed shelters that can be erected and dismantled as needed. In forested regions, nomads build various forms of huts and lean-tos from branches, bark, and hides. These structures are reasonably effective, providing wind protection and creating a space that can be warmed with a small fire. In the treeless tundra and steppe regions, however, wood is scarce or absent, forcing nomads to get creative. They turn to the most abundant resource available: the bones and tusks of mammoths and other large animals. Archaeological sites across Russia and Ukraine have revealed extraordinary structures built primarily from mammoth bones. These bone huts use massive skulls and long bones as structural elements, with mammoth tusks forming arched roof supports. The spaces between bones are filled with hides, turf, and other materials to create walls. A carefully tended fire inside provides warmth, while smoke exits through a hole in the roof. These structures represent massive investments of labor. Hundreds of bones must be collected, transported, and assembled, but they can shelter a family through an entire winter and can be reused season after season if the group returns to the same location. Some nomadic groups take advantage of natural shelters, particularly caves and rock overhangs. Contrary to popular imagination, Caves are not the primary dwelling of Ice Age humans. Most caves are dark, damp, and unpleasant. But shallow caves and rock shelters offering overhead protection and windbreaks are highly valued. And sites with good rock shelters show evidence of repeated occupation over thousands of years. Nomads modify these natural shelters by building walls to close off open sides, creating hearths to concentrate heat, and sometimes even carving the rock itself to improve drainage or create storage niches. The organization of living space within shelters reveals much about Ice Age life. Hearths are centrally located, providing heat and light while serving as the focus of social activity. Sleeping areas surround the hearth, with the most sheltered spots reserved for children and elders. Work areas for toolmaking, hide processing, and food preparation occupy other zones. Storage areas for supplies and equipment are often located near entrances or in cooler parts of the shelter. This spatial organization is remarkably consistent across different cultures and time periods, suggesting that certain arrangements work better than others for human social and practical needs. The psychological importance of shelter mirrors that of fire. A good shelter creates a sense of security, a defined space that is ours in a vast and often hostile landscape. Inside the shelter, social bonds are maintained, knowledge is transmitted, and rest is possible. The distinction between inside and outside becomes fundamental to how nomads conceptualize their world. Inside is safe, warm, social, and human. Outside is dangerous, cold, wild, and other. This dichotomy shapes human psychology in ways that persist to the present day. Nomadic groups also develop sophisticated strategies for site selection when establishing camps. Good camps require multiple resources. Water nearby, but not so close that flooding is a risk. Visibility and defensibility against both predators and potential human rivals. Proximity to hunting grounds or other food sources. Availability of materials for fuel and shelter construction. Protection from prevailing winds. Experienced nomads can read landscapes quickly, identifying promising camp locations almost instinctively. This knowledge is hard-won, built up over generations of trial and error, success and tragedy. The seasonal rhythm of nomadic life revolves around the relationship between clothing, shelter, and environment. During harsh winter months, groups hunker down in the best shelters they can create, venturing out only for essential hunting and wood gathering. Clothing is worn constantly, and maintenance of garments becomes a critical task. Spring brings relief but also challenges. Melting snow creates muddy, difficult traveling conditions, and careful timing is needed to move to new locations before food supplies are exhausted. Summer allows lighter clothing and simpler shelters, but also requires preparation for the next winter. Hunting for hides to make new clothing, processing and storing food, gathering materials for shelter construction, repairing damaged gear. The sheer amount of labor required to survive in Ice Age climates is staggering. Making a single fur garment requires killing the animal, skinning it carefully to preserve the hide, processing the hide through multiple steps, cutting the leather to pattern, and sewing it together with sinew thread using bone needles. Perhaps 40 hours of work for a simple coat. A family needs multiple complete sets of clothing, as garments wear out, get damaged, or outgrown by children. Shelter construction, particularly the mammoth bone huts, represents weeks of labor. Food acquisition in harsh environments requires constant effort. Almost every waking hour is devoted to the basic requirements of survival. Yet humans in these harsh environments do more than merely survive. They create art, music, and elaborate burial rituals. They carve beautiful figurines from mammoth ivory, paint sophisticated images on cave walls, fashion jewelry from shells and stones. This cultural flowering in the midst of an ice age demonstrates something profound about human nature. We are not satisfied with mere survival. We need meaning, beauty, and connection. The very harshness of the environment may have encouraged this cultural development. Long winters spent sheltering together provide time for artistic creation, storytelling, and ritual. The cooperation required for survival in extreme conditions strengthens social bonds and creates a sense of shared identity. The nomads of the Ice Age are not just surviving. They are building civilizations, albeit portable, nomadic ones. Chapter 4. Hunting Megafauna. The massive woolly mammoth towers over the group of hunters, its curved tusks nearly 4 meters long, its shaggy coat hanging almost to the ground. The animal weighs 6 tons, possesses enormous strength, and can crush a human with a single step. Yet the hunters armed only with wooden spears tipped with stone points, without any ranged weapons more sophisticated than thrown spears, without horses or dogs to help them intend to kill this mammoth. This scene plays out thousands of times across Ice Age Europe and Asia, and somehow, impossibly, the humans usually win. How do these nomadic hunters manage to kill animals many times their size, armed with technology that seems hopelessly inadequate for the task? The answer reveals human ingenuity at its finest. Direct confrontation with megafauna is rarely the preferred strategy. Too dangerous, too uncertain, too likely to result in injured or dead hunters. Instead, nomadic groups develop sophisticated hunting techniques that leverage human advantages: intelligence, cooperation, planning, and endurance. They study their prey exhaustively, learning behavior patterns, seasonal movements, social structures, and vulnerabilities. This knowledge, accumulated over generations and carefully transmitted through oral tradition, allows hunters to predict where and when animals will be vulnerable. Mammoths, despite their imposing size, have weaknesses that clever hunters can exploit. During winter, deep snow makes movement difficult, especially for young or old animals. Mammoths must feed constantly to maintain their enormous bulk, spending up to 18 hours per day eating, which makes them somewhat inattentive to threats. They are social animals with strong family bonds, and adults will often risk danger to protect young. They follow predictable migration routes between summer and winter feeding grounds. All of these factors create opportunities for hunters who think strategically rather than simply charging in with spears. One common hunting strategy is the ambush at water sources. Mammoths must drink regularly, and in winter, open water is scarce. Rivers that remain unfrozen due to currents become natural choke points where animals must come to drink. Hunters wait in hiding near these locations, sometimes for days, until a vulnerable target appears. The preferred targets are juveniles or elderly animals, weaker than prime adults, but still large enough to provide substantial meat and materials. When the moment is right, hunters emerge from concealment and launch a coordinated attack. They aim for vulnerable spots: the abdomen, the flanks, the area just behind the front legs where vital organs are closer to the surface. Stone-tipped spears, properly thrust, can penetrate deep, causing internal bleeding and organ damage. But even a mortally wounded mammoth can take hours or days to die, and a wounded animal is extremely dangerous. The hunters don't press the attack once serious injuries are inflicted. Instead, they back off and follow at a safe distance, waiting for blood loss and shock to weaken the animal. This strategy of pursuit hunting leverages a uniquely human advantage: endurance. Humans are among the best endurance runners in the animal kingdom, capable of maintaining a steady pace for hours. A wounded mammoth, constantly harried by following hunters, never gets a chance to rest and recover. Eventually, the animal weakens enough that the hunters can move in for the kill. Another hunting technique involves driving animals into natural traps. Steep-sided ravines, bogs, and areas of deep snow all become death traps for heavy animals. Archaeological sites across Eurasia show evidence of mammoth skeletons in locations suggesting deliberate herding. Hunters use fire, noise, and coordinated movement to panic animals and drive them toward these natural traps. A mammoth mired in a bog or stuck in a ravine is helpless. allowing hunters to approach safely and dispatch it with spears. This technique requires extensive cooperation. A single hunter cannot drive a mammoth herd in careful planning, scouting the terrain in advance to identify suitable locations. The tools used for megafauna hunting represent the cutting edge of Ice Age technology. Stone spear points are carefully crafted from high-quality materials, flint, obsidian, chosen for their ability to hold a sharp edge. The best points are thin, sharp, and symmetrical, requiring hours of skilled knapping to produce. They are hafted to wooden shafts using combinations of resin, sinew, and careful notching. The hafting must be both secure and replaceable. A point that breaks during a hunt can be swapped out for a fresh one if the shaft remains intact. Some hunters create composite weapons with multiple points or barbs, designed to remain lodged in the animal and continue causing damage. Wooden spears themselves represent sophisticated engineering. The wood must be straight, strong, and flexible. Not all woods meet these requirements, and experienced hunters know which species work best. The spear shaft is shaped and balanced for throwing or thrusting, often heat-treated to harden the wood. Length varies depending on intended use. Shorter, stouter spears for close combat. Longer, lighter spears for throwing. Some groups develop outlaws or spear throwers, devices that extend the throwing arm and dramatically increase spear velocity and penetration. This innovation, appearing around 30,000 years ago in some regions, significantly improves hunting success rates. Hunting large game requires not just weapons and techniques, but also detailed knowledge of anatomy. Hunters must know where to strike to cause maximum damage, which wounds are immediately fatal and which merely enrage the animal. How to read an animal's behavior to predict its next move. This knowledge comes from experience, both personal experience and the accumulated wisdom of generations. Young hunters learn by observing, by listening to stories, and eventually by participating in hunts under the supervision of experienced elders. Mistakes in megafauna hunting can be fatal, making this education literally a matter of life and death. The killing of a large animal is just the beginning of the work. A 6-ton mammoth must be processed quickly before scavengers arrive and before the meat begins to spoil. This butchering is another occasion for the entire group to work together. Hunters use stone tools to make initial cuts through the thick hide, which can be several centimeters thick. They systematically remove edible meat, working efficiently to extract hundreds of kilograms before cold, fatigue, or predators force them to stop. Nothing goes to waste. Meat is cut into strips for drying or frozen for later use. Organs are consumed fresh, often at the kill site. Fat is rendered. Bones are collected for tools and building materials. Hide and fur are processed for clothing and shelter. Sinews become cordage. Even mammoth milk, if a nursing female is killed, is consumed. The amount of meat from a single mammoth can feed a small group for months, but preservation is crucial. In Ice Age climates, freezing provides natural refrigeration. Meat can be buried in snowbanks or permafrost, remaining frozen and fresh for extended periods. During warmer months, nomads dry meat into jerky, a preservation technique that reduces weight while maintaining nutritional value. They also render fat into a long-lasting, calorie-dense food that can be stored in containers made from animal stomachs or bladders. These preservation techniques allow nomadic groups to move away from kill sites while still benefiting from the harvest. Not all megafauna hunted by Ice Age nomads are as large as mammoths. Woolly rhinoceros, standing 2 meters at the shoulder and weighing up to 2 tons, are also targeted, though they are notoriously dangerous with their long horns and aggressive temperaments. Giant cave bears, towering over modern bears, are sometimes hunted but more often avoided. The risk-to-reward ratio is poor. Reindeer, horses, and bison, while much smaller than mammoths, are actually more important to most nomadic groups. These medium-sized animals provide manageable amounts of meat, are less dangerous to hunt, and exist in larger numbers. A successful reindeer hunt can feed a family for a week, requires less cooperation than a mammoth hunt, and poses minimal danger to the hunters. The seasonal movements of herd animals structure nomadic life. Reindeer migrate hundreds of kilometers between summer and winter ranges, and nomadic groups follow these migrations, setting up seasonal camps at strategic locations. The hunters learn to predict these movements with remarkable accuracy, positioning themselves at river crossings, mountain passes, or other bottlenecks where herds must pass. At these locations, hunters can take multiple animals in a single event, providing enough resources to sustain the group through lean times. Hunting technology and techniques vary across different regions and cultures. In the mammoth steppes of Central Asia, hunters develop elaborate pit traps, digging deep holes along animal trails and covering them with branches and grass. In forested regions of Europe, hunters use trees as advantages, attacking from above or herding animals into dense growth that impedes movement. In coastal areas, hunters target sea mammals, seals, walruses, and even small whales using harpoons and boats. Each environment demands specific adaptations, specific knowledge, specific tools. The social aspects of hunting are as important as the technical ones. Successful hunts require coordination, trust, and clearly defined roles. Someone must lead, making decisions about targets, timing, and tactics. Hunters must be able to communicate silently, using hand signals and subtle movements. They must trust their companions to execute their part of the plan and to come to their aid if something goes wrong. This cooperation extends beyond the hunted self-sharing meat, processing kills together, caring for injured hunters, and honoring those killed in hunting accidents all strengthen social bonds. Hunting large game is dangerous, and not all hunts succeed. Mammoths kill hunters with horns, tusks, and trampling hooves. Wounded animals become desperate and unpredictable. Accidents happen as spear shaft breaks at a critical moment. A hunter slips on ice. Misjudgment leads someone into the path of a charging animal. The archaeological record contains evidence of these tragedies. Human skeletons with healed fractures showing injuries consistent with megafauna encounters. Burial sites of young hunters who died far from old age. Yet the rewards justify the risks. A single successful mammoth hunt can sustain a group through an entire harsh winter. The prestige and status gained from successful hunting strengthen social hierarchies and provide incentives for taking calculated risks. Hunting also shapes human evolution in subtle but important ways. The physical demands favor certain traits: good distance vision, depth perception for spear throwing, endurance, and the ability to regulate body temperature during extended physical activity. The cognitive demands are perhaps even more significant. Planning complex hunts requires abstract thinking, the ability to imagine future scenarios and work backwards to determine present actions. Coordinating with other hunters requires sophisticated communication and social intelligence. Reading animal behavior demands careful observation and pattern recognition. These cognitive challenges may have contributed to the continued expansion of human brain size and complexity during the Ice Age period. The relationship between humans and megafauna is not purely predatory. Nomadic groups develop deep knowledge of and respect for the animals they hunt. Many cultures create elaborate rituals around hunting, seeking to honor the animal's spirit and ensure future hunting success. Cave paintings and carved figurines frequently depict mammoths, bison, horses, and other game animals, often with remarkable anatomical accuracy. These artistic representations may serve multiple purposes: teaching tools for young hunters, ritual objects to ensure hunting success, or simply expressions of respect and admiration for the animals that make human survival possible. Some archaeologists argue that human hunting pressure contributed to the extinction of mammoths, woolly rhinos, and other Ice Age megafauna. The timing is suspicious. Many of these animals disappear around the same time that human populations expand and hunting technologies improve. However, climate change at the end of the Ice Age also dramatically alters habitats, and disentangling human and environmental impacts proves difficult. Most likely, the extinctions result from a combination of factors: habitat loss from climate change, human hunting pressure, and perhaps diseases introduced by humans or their animal companions. Regardless of the cause, these extinctions force nomadic groups to adapt once again, shifting to smaller game animals and eventually contributing to the development of agriculture. The hunting of megafauna during the Ice Age represents one of the most remarkable achievements of early human nomads. Armed with Stone Age technology, operating in extremely harsh climates, facing animals that could kill them effortlessly, these hunters not only survive, but thrive. Their success testifies to human ingenuity, cooperation, and adaptability. The techniques developed during this period, stalking, ambushing, cooperative hunting, meat preservation, remain relevant long after the last mammoth dies. The knowledge gained through hunting megafauna becomes part of the accumulated wisdom that allows humanity to expand into every corner of the planet. Chapter 5: Water, Thirst, and Desert Survival. While some nomadic groups battle ice and snow, others confront an equally deadly extreme: waterless deserts where temperatures soar and moisture is almost non-existent. The Sahara, Arabian deserts, Central Asian steppes, and later the Australian outback all pose variations of the same fundamental challenge: how to survive where water, the most essential substance for human life, is scarce or absent. A human can survive weeks without food, but only 3 to 5 days without water, and even mild dehydration causes disorientation, weakness, and impaired judgment. In desert conditions where humans lose several liters of water per day through sweating and breathing, the margin for error becomes razor thin. The nomads who master desert environments demonstrate ingenuity that equals or exceeds that of their northern cousins. Where Ice Age hunters develop sophisticated clothing and shelter, desert nomads develop equally sophisticated water finding and water conservation techniques. The knowledge required to survive in deserts is vast, specific, and often counterintuitive. A mistake that merely causes discomfort in a temperate environment can be fatal in the desert. The learning curve is steep and unforgiving. Yet somehow humans not only survive in these environments, but eventually come to thrive there, developing rich cultures and successful subsistence strategies. The most obvious challenge is finding water in the first place. In true deserts, surface water is rare and often seasonal. After infrequent rains, water pools in rock depressions, collects in dry streambeds, and creates temporary lakes in low-lying areas. These water sources are ephemeral, disappearing within days or weeks as the water evaporates or soaks into the ground. Desert nomads must know where these sources are likely to appear after rain, how long they typically last, and how to detect them from a distance. They learn to read the landscape for subtle signs: certain plants that only grow near groundwater, animal trails converging toward hidden springs, changes in soil color, indicating moisture below the surface, the flight patterns of birds that need daily water access. Some water sources are more permanent but require knowledge to locate. Springs occur where underground aquifers reach the surface, often at the base of cliffs or in canyon systems. These springs can be small, sometimes just a trickle or a damp patch of earth, but they are life-saving for those who know where to find them. Nomadic groups carefully guard knowledge of spring locations, as water sources represent both survival and potential territory. The oral traditions of desert peoples often include detailed descriptions of routes between water sources, encoded in songs, stories, or mnemonic systems that allow knowledge to be preserved and transmitted across generations. But finding water is only part of the challenge. Desert nomads must also carry and store water. The earliest water containers are probably natural objects repurposed, hollow gourds, large shells, ostrich eggs with small holes drilled in them. Later, nomads developed more sophisticated containers, watertight baskets sealed with resin, leather bags that can be carried on the body, ceramic vessels that keep water cool through evaporation. Each container type has advantages and disadvantages. Ceramic vessels are fragile, but keep water cooler than leather. Ostrich eggshells are durable and have natural antibacterial properties, but hold limited volume. Leather bags are flexible and unbreakable, but can give water an unpleasant taste. The human body itself must adapt to desert conditions, though these adaptations are primarily behavioral rather than physiological. Nomads learn to minimize water loss through several strategies. They travel during cooler parts of the day early morning and evening, resting during the extreme heat of midday. They wear loose, layered clothing that protects skin from direct sun exposure, while allowing air circulation to cool the body through evaporative cooling. This seems counterintuitive to modern people who associate hot climates with minimal clothing. But desert nomads understand that exposed skin loses more water through perspiration and suffers from sun damage that further increases water needs. Desert nomads also develop sophisticated knowledge of which plants contain water. Many desert plants store moisture in roots, stems, or leaves as adaptations to arid conditions. Nomads learn to identify these plants and extract their water. Roots can be dug up and chewed or crushed to release moisture. Certain cacti and succulents contain drinkable water, though some are toxic or unpalatable. Some desert plants have sap that, while not quite water, can provide liquid in emergencies. This botanical knowledge is extensive and specific, knowing not just which plants contain water, but how to extract it, when different plants are most water-rich, and which parts of the plant are safe to consume. Animal sources also provide water. Blood from hunted animals, while not pleasant to contemplate, contains significant fluid. Some desert animals, particularly the oryx and other antelopes adapted to arid conditions, concentrate their urine to conserve water, meaning their blood has relatively high water content. Nomads learn to utilize every fluid from hunted animals' blood. Stomach contents, which often contain partially digested plant material with high moisture, even the fluid from eyeballs. This utilization of animal fluids is not barbaric survival cannibalism, but sophisticated resource management, extracting maximum benefit from each kill in an environment where nothing can be wasted. The timing of nomadic movements in deserts is crucial. Many desert regions have distinct wet and dry seasons. During or immediately after wet seasons, water is relatively abundant. Plants produce seeds and fruits, and prey animals are more common. Desert nomads time their movements to take advantage of these periods of relative abundance, ranging widely to harvest resources. During dry seasons, they retreat to areas near permanent water sources, accepting smaller territories and more limited resources in exchange for reliable access to water. This seasonal pattern creates a rhythm of expansion and contraction, movement and settlement that structures nomadic life in desert regions. Some nomadic groups develop techniques for creating artificial water sources. In areas with fog or dew, they construct rock piles or stretch fabric that catches moisture, which then drips into collection containers. In areas with slightly higher rainfall, they dig shallow basins that collect and hold rainwater, sometimes lining these cisterns with clay or stone to reduce seepage. These artificial water sources represent significant investments of labor, but pay dividends by creating reliable water access in otherwise inhospitable regions. The knowledge of where to place these structures, how to maintain them, and when they are likely to contain water becomes valuable cultural capital. Desert survival also requires managing one's internal water economy carefully. Desert nomads learn to recognize the early signs of dehydration: dark urine, headaches, dry mouth, irritability, and to take action before dehydration becomes severe. They understand that certain activities increase water loss: talking excessively, breathing through the mouth, physical exertion during hot periods. They develop habits that conserve water: breathing through the nose, moving slowly and deliberately, keeping a pebble or date pit in the mouth to stimulate saliva production and reduce the sensation of thirst. The psychological challenge of desert travel is significant. The vastness, emptiness, and harsh conditions can be psychologically oppressive. Mirages, caused by light refraction and heated air, create illusions of water where none exists, tempting desperate travelers to waste precious energy chasing phantoms. Disorientation is common, as desert landscapes often lack obvious landmarks and can look similar in all directions. Desert nomads develop navigational techniques to counter these challenges: reading the position of the sun and stars, observing wind patterns and sand dune formations, recognizing subtle variations in terrain and vegetation, and using mental maps built up through repeated traverses of traditional routes. In some desert regions, nomads develop symbiotic relationships with other species that help solve the water challenge. Camels, domesticated around 3000 BCE in Arabia, revolutionized desert nomadism by serving as mobile water storage. A camel can drink up to 100 liters in one session and then go weeks without water, allowing nomadic groups to venture farther from water sources and carry more supplies. Dogs help locate water by scent and can dig at promising sites more efficiently than humans. Even certain birds, whose behavior indicates nearby water, become partners in the search for this precious resource. The social implications of water scarcity are profound. In desert environments, sharing water is not just generosity, but survival insurance. The person you help today may be the one who saves your life tomorrow. Many desert nomadic cultures develop elaborate ethics around water sharing, with complex rules about obligations to provide water to travelers, strangers, and even enemies under certain circumstances. Denying water to someone in need is considered among the most serious moral violations. These ethical systems are not abstract philosophies, but practical survival mechanisms that benefit everyone in the long run. Desert nomads also develop strategies for dealing with heat itself, the other great challenge of arid environments. During midday, when temperatures can exceed 50 degrees Celsius in some deserts, finding shade becomes essential. In treeless deserts, nomads create artificial shade using cloth, hides, or simply piling rocks to create shadows. They dig shallow scrapes in the ground, where temperatures are several degrees cooler than at the surface. They learn which rock formations provide natural shade and plan routes that allow them to move from one shaded spot to another. At night, when desert temperatures often plummet, they use clothing and shelter techniques similar to those of their northern cousins, protecting against cold rather than heat. Food in desert environments presents additional challenges. Water is needed not just for drinking but also for digestion, and eating dry foods increases water requirements. Desert nomads learn to prefer foods with high moisture content when available: fresh fruits, succulent plants, fresh meat rather than dried. They understand that some foods, particularly those high in protein, require more water to process and avoid these during times of water scarcity. Salt, while necessary for health, increases thirst, so salt consumption is carefully managed. The success of desert nomads in conquering seemingly uninhabitable environments demonstrates the power of cultural adaptation. Unlike their northern cousins, who rely heavily on technological solutions like elaborate clothing and shelters, desert nomads succeed primarily through vast, detailed, carefully transmitted knowledge about water, plants, animals, navigation, and survival strategies. This knowledge is the most valuable possession a desert nomad owns, more precious than any physical goods. It is carefully guarded, systematically taught, and continuously refined through experience. The elders who possess this knowledge are revered, and the loss of an elder represents a potentially catastrophic loss of survival information. Desert adaptation also leaves its mark on human genetics. Populations that have lived in deserts for many generations show certain adaptations: more efficient kidney function that concentrates urine and conserves water, slightly enhanced heat tolerance, and in some cases, changes in sweat gland density and function. These biological adaptations are modest compared to the cultural and behavioral adaptations, but they demonstrate that the human body itself responds to the challenges of desert living, given enough time. Chapter 6. Mountain survival. Mountains present a unique combination of challenges that test human adaptability in ways different from either ice sheets or deserts. As elevation increases, temperatures drop, oxygen becomes scarcer, UV radiation intensifies, and weather becomes more unpredictable and violent. The nomads who venture into high mountain environments, the Himalayas, Andes, Caucasus, and other ranges, must solve multiple overlapping survival problems simultaneously. They must cope with cold like their Ice Age cousins, manage scarce resources like desert nomads, and additionally overcome the physiological challenge of reduced oxygen availability that affects no other environment on Earth. The human body is optimized for life at or near sea level, where oxygen comprises about 21% of the atmosphere at normal pressure. At 3,000 meters elevation, the air pressure drops significantly, reducing the effective oxygen available to breathe. At 5,000 meters, there is roughly half the oxygen available at sea level. Above 8,000 meters, the death zone, humans cannot survive long-term even with perfect acclimatization. The body cannot get enough oxygen to maintain basic functions and slowly deteriorates. Yet nomadic peoples have lived at elevations above 4,000 meters for thousands of years, raising families, herding animals, and creating vibrant cultures in places that lowlanders would find barely survivable. The immediate effect of high altitude on unacclimatized humans is acute mountain sickness, headaches, nausea, fatigue, dizziness, and difficulty sleeping. More severe cases develop into life-threatening conditions like high-altitude pulmonary edema, fluid in the lungs, or high-altitude cerebral edema, brain swelling. The body's response to reduced oxygen includes increased heart rate and breathing rate, but these compensations are insufficient for people who ascend too quickly. The solution is acclimatization, a series of physiological changes that occur over days to weeks at altitude. The body produces more red blood cells to carry oxygen more efficiently, increases the number of capillaries to deliver oxygen to tissues more effectively, and makes various cellular level changes that improve oxygen utilization. Nomadic groups moving into mountain environments obviously cannot wait weeks to acclimatize before beginning their occupation of these regions. Instead, they probably ascend gradually over generations, moving to slightly higher elevations over years and decades, allowing biological and cultural adaptations to accumulate. Archaeological evidence suggests humans have occupied moderate altitude environments, 2,000 to 3,000 meters, for tens of thousands of years, but permanent settlement in very high elevations above 4,000 meters is much more recent, perhaps only 10,000 to 20,000 years old. This timeline suggests that very high altitude settlement required not just cultural adaptations, but genetic ones as well. Modern genetic studies have revealed remarkable adaptations in populations that have lived at high altitude for many generations. Tibetan populations, for instance, have genetic variants that increase blood flow and oxygen delivery without raising red blood cell count excessively. Too many red blood cells makes blood thick and increases risk of clots and strokes. Andean populations have developed different adaptations, including larger lung volumes and more efficient oxygen processing at the cellular level. These genetic adaptations have evolved relatively quickly in evolutionary terms, appearing over just a few hundred generations. demonstrating that when selective pressure is strong enough, evolution can produce significant changes quite rapidly. But genetic adaptation alone does not explain how nomads survive in mountains. Cultural and technological adaptations are equally important. Mountain environments are typically cold, especially at night and during winter, requiring the same clothing and shelter technologies developed by Ice Age peoples. However, mountains add additional challenges. Weather in mountains is notoriously unstable, with conditions changing rapidly from clear and calm to violent storms with little warning. Nomads in mountains must always be prepared for sudden weather changes, carrying extra clothing and knowing where to find emergency shelter. They learn to read subtle signs in cloud formations, wind direction, and animal behavior to predict incoming storms. The terrain itself is dangerous. Steep slopes, loose rocks, ice, and snow create constant hazards. A single misstep can result in a fatal fall. Mountain nomads develop exceptional balance and terrain reading skills, learning where to place feet safely, how to test the stability of rocks before trusting weight to them, and how to navigate snow and ice without specialized equipment. Children in mountain cultures learn these skills from an early age, developing physical capabilities that seem almost superhuman to lowland visitors. Archaeological evidence suggests that early mountain nomads did suffer frequent injuries from falls and accidents. But over time, cultural knowledge about safe mountain travel accumulated and injury rates declined. Finding food in mountains presents unique challenges. Many mountains are above the tree line, meaning no wood for fuel and limited plant resources. Animal life at high elevations is sparse. Only specially adapted species can survive there. Mountain nomads typically rely on a few key resources: hardy mountain ungulates like ibex, yak, llamas, and vicucas, marmots, and other burrowing mammals. And during brief summer months, migratory herds that move to high elevation to escape heat and insects. Hunting in mountains requires different techniques than in flatlands. Prey animals are alert and wary, with excellent vision and the ability to escape by climbing terrain humans cannot easily follow. Hunters must approach from above when possible, use terrain to mask their approach, and be willing to pursue wounded animals across dangerous ground. Plant resources in mountains are limited but crucial. Various roots, tubers, and seeds provide calories and nutrients. Some plants that grow at high altitudes have developed concentrated nutrients as adaptations to the harsh environment, making them valuable food sources despite their small size. Mountain nomads learn the seasonal cycles of these plants, knowing when and where different species will be available. They also learn which plants are edible at high altitude but toxic at lower elevations, or vice versa, as changes in elevation affect plant chemistry. Water is paradoxically both abundant and scarce in mountains. Snow and ice are everywhere at high elevations, but converting them to drinkable water requires fuel for melting, which is scarce. Mountain streams run fast and cold, often difficult or dangerous to access. Nomads learn where streams are accessible, which snow is clean enough to melt for water, and how to efficiently melt snow using minimal fuel. They understand that eating snow directly is dangerous. It lowers body temperature and can cause hypothermia. They know that glacier water contains fine rock powder that causes digestive problems if consumed regularly. This detailed knowledge of water sources and water quality is essential for mountain survival. The social organization of mountain nomads often reflects the constraints of their environment. Mountain terrain fragments populations, creating isolated valleys and pockets that may have little contact with neighbors just a few ridges away. This isolation can lead to genetic drift and the development of distinct local cultures. At the same time, mountains create natural migration routes, passes, valleys, and ridges that channel movement in predictable ways. Control of these routes brings strategic advantages, and archaeological evidence suggests that conflicts over mountain passes have occurred for millennia. Mountain nomads must balance isolation with the need for trade and social contact, developing networks of exchange that connect highland and lowland populations. Trade becomes particularly important for mountain nomads because mountains often lack certain essential resources. Salt, for instance, may be unavailable at high elevation. Certain plants used for medicine, fibers, or food do not grow in mountains. Metal ores may be present, but cannot be smelted without fuel. Mountain nomads trade the unique resources of their environment furs from mountain animals, minerals, perhaps wool from high-altitude camelids, for lowland goods like grain, salt, pottery, and metal items. These trade relationships create interdependence between highland and lowland populations, fostering both cooperation and occasional conflict. The seasonal rhythm of life for mountain nomads often involves substantial elevation changes. Winter at very high elevations is simply too harsh to endure comfortably. So many mountain nomadic groups practice vertical transhumance, migrating to lower elevations during winter and returning to high pastures during summer. This pattern allows them to access the resources of both lowlands, winter grazing, milder weather, and highlands, summer grazing, escape from heat and insects, access to specific resources. The timing of these migrations is critical too early, and high elevation resources are not yet available. Too late and early winter storms can trap herds and people in dangerous conditions. Mountain environments also present unique cognitive challenges. The three-dimensional terrain requires sophisticated spatial reasoning to navigate successfully. Routes that look direct may prove impossible due to cliffs, crevasses, or impassable slopes. Reading terrain from a distance, planning routes through complex topography, and remembering landmarks and landscapes that can look similar from different angles all require mental capabilities that must be learned and practiced. Mountain nomads develop exceptional spatial memory and mental mapping abilities, carrying detailed cognitive maps of their territories that allow navigation even in poor visibility. The dangers of mountains create a culture of caution and respect for the environment. Mountain nomads often develop elaborate beliefs and rituals around mountains themselves, viewing peaks as sacred, dangerous, or both. These beliefs serve practical functions. They encode respect for mountain hazards and create social norms around safe behavior. Stories of disasters, successful ascents, and narrow escapes pass down through generations, carrying practical survival information wrapped in narrative form. Archaeological evidence of early mountain occupation is challenging to find because high-altitude sites are subject to extreme erosion and weathering. What to survive suggests that humans initially used mountains seasonally, ascending during summer to hunt and gather resources, then retreating to lower elevations for winter. Only gradually do year-round occupation and permanent settlement emerge. This pattern makes sense. Seasonal use allows humans to exploit mountain resources without fully solving all the challenges of high-altitude survival. Year-round occupation requires mastering those challenges completely, which takes time, knowledge, and probably genetic adaptation. The relationship between mountain nomads and their animals is particularly close. At high altitudes where human physiology is stressed, domestic animals adapted to altitude become essential partners. Yaks in Central Asia, llamas and alpacas in the Andes, and other high-altitude domesticates provide transportation, milk, meat, fiber, and fuel, dried dung. These animals can survive and even thrive at elevations that severely stress humans. Mountain nomads learn to read their animals' behavior, trusting them to find grazing, water, and safe paths through treacherous terrain. In return, they provide protection, veterinary care using traditional knowledge, and careful breeding to maintain hardy, altitude-adapted herds. The mastery of mountain environments by nomadic peoples represents triumph over some of the most extreme conditions on Earth. The combination of cold, altitude terrain hazards, And resource scarcity creates a survival challenge that equals or exceeds that of deserts or ice sheets. Yet humans not only survive in mountains, but create rich cultures, raise families, and maintain traditions for thousands of years. The adaptations, genetic, cultural, technological, that make this possible demonstrate the extraordinary flexibility of human beings. We are tropical animals by origin, yet through ingenuity and determination, we make ourselves at home on the roof of the world. Chapter 7. Coastal and Maritime. The edge of the ocean presents an entirely different set of challenges and opportunities for nomadic peoples. Coastlines around the world offer abundant resources: fish, shellfish, seaweed, sea mammals, seabirds, but accessing these resources requires technologies and knowledge distinct from those needed for terrestrial hunting and gathering. The first humans to exploit coastal environments extensively developed new toolkits, new skills, and new cultural patterns that set them apart from their inland cousins. Moreover, the coast provides migration routes that may have enabled some of the earliest human expansions out of Africa and across Ireland, Southeast Asia to Australia. Archaeological evidence suggests humans have been using coastal resources for at least 164,000 years. Based on shell middens, refuse heaps of discarded shellfish shells found in South African caves. These early coastal foragers collect mussels, limpets, and other shellfish from rocks exposed at low tide, supplementing their diet of terrestrial game and plants. This opportunistic shellfish gathering probably requires no special tools or knowledge. Shellfish are visible, immobile, and relatively easy to collect. But this simple beginning leads eventually to sophisticated maritime cultures capable of deep-sea fishing, whale hunting, and ocean crossings. The tidal rhythm structures life for coastal nomads in ways that landlocked peoples never experience. Twice daily, the ocean retreats, exposing rocks, tidal pools, and beaches teeming with edible organisms. This creates predictable windows of opportunity. Shellfish can only be collected during low tide, and experienced coastal foragers learn to time their activities to the tide's rhythm. They understand spring tides, higher high tides, and lower low tides that occur during new and full moons, and neap tides, smaller tidal ranges during quarter moons, planning major collecting expeditions for the best spring low tides. This connection to lunar and tidal cycles influences coastal cultures profoundly, affecting their calendars, belief systems, and daily routines. Shellfish collecting seems simple, but actually requires substantial knowledge. Some shellfish are toxic during certain seasons when they accumulate poisonous algae. Others are unsafe to eat raw, but harmless when cooked. Still others are unpalatable or nutritionally poor, despite being abundant. Coastal nomads develop encyclopedic knowledge of which shellfish to collect when, where different species are most abundant, and how to prepare each type. They create specialized tools for shellfish collection, sharpened sticks for prying limpets from rocks, bags and baskets for carrying shells, stone hammers for breaking open larger specimens. Archaeological sites show clear evidence of shellfish processing: cracked shells, stone anvils used for opening shells, and refuse heaps organized by shell species. Fish provide another major coastal resource, but unlike shellfish, they require more sophisticated technology to catch. The earliest fishing technology probably involves simple traps and weir structures built in tidal zones that trap fish when the tide recedes. These require minimal tool-making ability, but substantial knowledge of fish behavior and tide patterns. Over time, coastal peoples develop hooks made from bone, shell, or wood, nets woven from plant fibers or animal sinew, and eventually spears and harpoons for larger fish. Each technology opens access to different fish species and different parts of the marine environment. Bone fish hooks appear in the archaeological record at least 40,000 years ago, demonstrating sophisticated understanding of both fish behavior and material science. Creating a functional fishhook from bone requires shaping the material so it's strong enough not to break, under stress, yet thin and sharp enough to penetrate a fish's mouth. The hook must be the right size for the target species. Too large and small fish can't take the bait. Too small and large fish straighten it or break free. Coastal nomads experiment with different hook designs, eventually developing specialized hooks for different fish. J-shaped hooks, circular hooks, gorge hooks that lodge sideways in a fish's throat. Each design represents accumulated knowledge about fish anatomy, feeding behavior, and the physics of hooking and landing fish. Nets revolutionize fishing by allowing mass capture of schooling fish. Creating nets requires fiber production, processing plant materials into strong, flexible cordage, and weaving this cordage into a mesh with appropriate spacing for target fish. Small mesh nets catch tiny fish but create more drag in water. Large mesh nets allow small fish to escape but work well for larger species. Net fishing often involves cooperation, multiple people deploying a large net from shore or from boats, working together to encircle and draw in schools of fish. Archaeological evidence of net fishing is sparse because nets are organic and rarely survive. But some waterlogged sites have preserved fragments showing sophisticated knotting and construction techniques. Spearfishing requires different skills: stealth, excellent hand-eye coordination, and understanding of light refraction in water. Objects underwater appear in different positions than they actually are due to refraction. Coastal nomads learn to compensate for refraction automatically, spearing fish with accuracy that seems magical to inexperienced observers. Some groups develop sophisticated multi-pronged spears or harpoons with detachable points and line attached, allowing them to target larger fish without losing their weapons. The development of harpoon technology eventually enables hunting of sea mammals, seals, sea lions, and even whales. Boats represent perhaps the most significant maritime technology, expanding human access to resources and enabling migration routes otherwise impossible. The earliest boats leave almost no archaeological trace. They are made from organic materials that decay quickly. But the human presence in Australia by at least 65,000 years ago proves that boats capable of ocean crossings existed at that time, as reaching Australia from Southeast Asia requires crossing significant stretches of open water, even during periods of lowest sea level. These early boats are probably simple rafts or dugout canoes, but they are seaworthy enough for voyages of tens of kilometers across potentially dangerous waters. Dugout canoes are created by hollowing out large logs using fire and stone. Tools a labor-intensive process requiring days or weeks of work. The canoe maker carefully controls burning and scraping to create a vessel that is lightweight yet strong, balanced for stability yet sleek for speed. Different trees work better for different purposes. Some woods are rot-resistant, others are lighter or easier to work. Coastal nomads develop deep knowledge of wood properties and canoe construction techniques, knowledge that is carefully guarded and passed down through apprenticeship. A well-made dugout can last for years and represents substantial investment of labor and skill. Skin boats offer an alternative technology in regions where large trees are scarce. These boats use a wooden frame covered with waterproofed animal hide seal, walrus or terrestrial mammals depending on availability. Skin boats are lighter than dugouts and can be larger, capable of carrying more people or cargo. Arctic peoples develop sophisticated skin boat technology, creating both small kayaks for individual hunters and larger umiaks for transporting families and goods. The construction knowledge for skin boats is equally complex as for dugouts. Frame design must distribute stresses properly. Skins must be carefully prepared and sewn to be watertight, and maintenance is constant to prevent leaks. Navigation at sea requires new skills that landlocked nomads never develop. Out of sight of land, navigation by reference to fixed landmarks becomes impossible. Coastal nomads learn celestial navigation, using the sun's position during day and stars at night to maintain direction. They observe that certain stars remain fixed, Polaris in the northern hemisphere, while others rotate around them, providing reliable directional references. They learn to read wave patterns, understanding that swells maintain consistent direction even when local winds shift, providing another navigation cue. Experienced navigators also read more subtle signs. The behavior of birds. Most seabirds return to land at night, so following them at dusk leads to shore. The color and temperature of water. Currents have distinct characteristics. Even the smell of land carried on the breeze from tens of kilometers away. The open ocean presents hazards that coastal nomads must understand and respect. Sudden storms can capsize boats, separate paddlers from shore, or drive vessels onto rocks. Strong currents and riptides can drag swimmers out to sea. Waves breaking over rocks or reefs can destroy boats and drown occupants. Coastal nomads develop detailed knowledge of local conditions, where reefs and rocks lie, where currents run strongest, where storms are most likely to develop. This knowledge is encoded in oral traditions, songs, and stories that serve as maritime charts for preliterate peoples. The navigator who knows these traditions can avoid most maritime hazards and maintain relative safety, even in potentially dangerous waters. Sea mammals provide valuable resources, but are challenging to hunt. Seals can be taken on shore or ice when they haul out to rest, but hunting them in water requires boats and harpoon skills. The hunter must approach close enough for a killing shot without alarming the seal, strike accurately at a moving target, and secure the animal before it sinks or escapes. Walruses and sea lions are larger, more dangerous, and more difficult to kill, requiring heavier harpoons and often multiple hunters working cooperatively. Whales represent the ultimate maritime hunting challenge. Even small whale species weigh several tons, and killing one requires specialized technology, considerable bravery, and often whole communities working together. Whale hunting develops independently in several regions: the Arctic, the Pacific Northwest, Japan, and later the Pacific Islands. Each culture develops unique techniques, but common elements appear. Harpoons with detachable heads and attached floats, which tire the whale by creating drag and keep the carcass from sinking. Boats large and stable enough to approach whales safely, and exceptional maritime skills to avoid being capsized or destroyed by a wounded whale. Successful whale hunts provide enormous quantities of meat, blubber, which can be rendered into oil for fuel and food, baleen for tools and construction, and bone. A single large whale can feed a coastal community for months, making the risks of whale hunting worthwhile despite the dangers. Coastal and maritime nomadism differs from terrestrial nomadism in key ways. Movement often follows fish migrations rather than terrestrial game herds. Seasonal camps are established at locations that provide access to different resources at different times. Salmon runs in summer, shellfish year-round, seaweed in spring, migratory fish in fall. Some coastal groups become semi-sedentary, establishing permanent base camps and making shorter foraging trips from these bases. This semi-sedentary pattern is possible because coastal resources are often more predictable and abundant than terrestrial resources, allowing people to remain in one location for extended periods without depleting their resource base. The abundance of coastal resources has another important effect. It supports higher population densities than most terrestrial environments. Shellfish are reliably available, fish runs occur predictably, and sea mammals provide concentrated resources. This productivity allows coastal nomadic groups to grow larger and more socially complex than typical inland hunter-gatherers. Archaeological sites show that coastal peoples develop increasingly elaborate material culture, art, ceremonial objects, permanent structures, and status distinctions. Some archaeologists argue that coastal abundance provides the foundation for later development of sedentary societies and eventually agriculture. Coastal environments also foster trade and cultural exchange. Boats enable movement along coasts and between islands, connecting populations that would be isolated in terrestrial contexts. Coastal trade networks exchange locally abundant resources for goods from other regions. Shells for tools, dried fish for obsidian, marine mammal oil for terrestrial goods. These networks create cultural connections across vast distances, spreading innovations, languages, and genetic material. The Lapita culture of the Pacific, for instance, spread across thousands of kilometers of ocean, maintaining cultural coherence despite being scattered across countless islands. The relationship between coastal nomads and their environment is somewhat different from that of terrestrial nomads. The ocean is more dangerous, less forgiving of mistakes, and less readable than terrestrial environments. A skilled land hunter can read tracks, signs, and landscapes to predict animal behavior and location. The ocean reveals fewer signs, and its inhabitants are largely invisible beneath the surface. Success at sea requires different mindsets: acceptance of uncertainty, willingness to take calculated risks, and patience for long periods of waiting broken by intense activity. These cultural patterns persist in maritime societies long after the nomadic lifestyle transitions to settlement. The legacy of coastal nomadism extends far beyond the ancient past. Many of the technologies and skills developed by coastal nomads remain relevant today. Boat building, navigation, fishing techniques, understanding of tides and marine ecology. Indigenous coastal peoples around the world maintain traditions of maritime knowledge that date back thousands of years. Modern fisheries still use net designs, hook types, and fishing strategies that were invented by prehistoric coastal nomads. The deep connection between humans and the sea, the skills that allow us to harvest marine resources and traverse ocean waters, all trace back to those early nomadic groups who first ventured to the water's edge and learned to make it their home. Chapter 8. Tracking, Navigation, and Reading the Land in a World Without Maps. GPS, compasses, or written directions. How do nomadic peoples navigate across vast distances, sometimes covering thousands of kilometers during their seasonal migrations? How do they find their way through featureless deserts, dense forests, or snow-covered landscapes where one vista looks identical to the next? The answer lies in one of the most sophisticated cognitive achievements of prehistoric humanity: the development of navigation and tracking skills so refined that they seem almost supernatural to modern observers who have lost these abilities. These skills represent accumulated knowledge built up over countless generations, combined with intensive training from childhood and acute observational abilities that most modern humans never develop. Tracking begins with simple observation. An animal passes through an area and leaves signs of its passage. Footprints in soft earth, bent grass stems, disturbed leaves, scratches on bark, droppings, feeding signs. Each tells part of a story about what animal was here, when it passed, where it was going, and what it was doing. To an untrained eye, these signs are invisible or meaningless. To an expert tracker, they form a narrative as clear as written text. The tracker sees not just individual signs, but patterns that reveal the animal's behavior, health, emotional state, and probable destination. This reading of sign is the foundation of tracking, but expert trackers go far beyond simply following obvious trails. A skilled tracker can determine the species, age, sex, and individual identity of an animal from its tracks. Size and shape reveal species. Depth and spacing indicate weight and gait. Peculiarities in the print, a damaged toe, an unusual wear pattern identify specific individuals. The tracker can estimate how long ago the animal passed by examining how weathered the tracks are. Sharp edges indicate fresh tracks. Eroded, filled, or overgrown tracks are older. Moisture content of overturned earth, the behavior of insects at the site, and countless other subtle signs all contribute to temporal estimation. In some cases, expert trackers can age tracks to within hours or even minutes. But tracking is more than following obvious sign. When tracks disappear in rocky areas, on hard ground, in water, the tracker must extrapolate from the animal's last known trajectory, predict its likely destination based on behavioral knowledge, and search ahead for where sign will reappear. This requires understanding animal psychology and ecology. Where would this animal go to drink? Where are the best feeding areas at this time of year? What terrain features would it use for travel? The tracker combines observational data with predictive modeling, forming hypotheses about the animal's route and testing them by searching likely areas for confirming sign. Social animals leave different patterns than solitary ones. A herd of reindeer creates obvious, heavily trampled trails that are easy to follow but don't provide much information about individual animals. A solitary bear leaves sparse, subtle sign that requires careful observation but tells a detailed story about that specific animal's movements and behavior. Predators and prey leave different patterns. Predators often move purposefully toward specific destinations. Prey animals move more erratically, feeding and remaining alert for danger. Nomadic trackers learn the typical movement patterns of dozens of species, recognizing the distinctive signature of each. Tracking extends beyond visual observation of physical sign. Expert trackers use all their senses. They smell water, vegetation, animals, and decay, using scent to locate resources or detect nearby animals. They listen for alarm calls of birds and other animals that indicate predator presence or movement. They feel changes in temperature, humidity, and air movement that signal proximity to water, changes in elevation, or approaching weather. They notice which direction dew forms on objects, indicating prevailing wind, how quickly moisture evaporates, indicating humidity and temperature, and countless other environmental cues that modern humans typically ignore. The cognitive demands of tracking are substantial. Trackers must maintain detailed mental models of their environment, constantly updating these models with new information. They must remember the locations of previously observed sign, correlate new observations with old ones, and integrate everything into a coherent narrative about animal movement and behavior. They must distinguish between sign from different time periods, understanding that tracks from multiple animals at different times can overlap and create complex, confusing patterns. This cognitive load requires excellent working memory, spatial reasoning, and attention to detail. Navigation presents similar cognitive challenges, but operates at larger scales. Where tracking follows specific animals over hours or days, navigation guides human movements over weeks, months, or years. Nomadic navigation relies on multiple information sources used redundantly. If one method fails or becomes unavailable, others remain to prevent disorientation. The most basic navigation technique uses landmarks, distinctive terrain features that serve as reference points. Mountains, rock formations, distinctive trees, river confluences, any feature that is unique, visible from distance, and relatively permanent can serve as a landmark. Nomads learn the locations of thousands of landmarks throughout their territories, creating mental maps of remarkable detail and accuracy. But landmarks alone are insufficient for navigation in many environments. Deserts, plains, and oceans lack obvious landmarks. Forests obscure distant features. Darkness makes visual navigation impossible. Weather can reduce visibility to near zero. For these situations, nomads develop alternative navigation strategies. Celestial navigation uses the sun, moon, and stars as directional references. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west, with predictable seasonal variations in exact direction. At night, certain stars provide reliable directional information. Polaris remains fixed in the northern sky in the northern hemisphere. The Southern Cross indicates south in the southern hemisphere. Other constellations rotate predictably around these fixed points. Nomadic navigators learn to estimate time by observing celestial bodies' positions. The sun's height above the horizon indicates time of day. The moon's phase reveals the time of month. Certain stars' positions mark seasons. This celestial timekeeping allows navigators to coordinate movements, predict resource availability, and maintain social schedules without mechanical clocks or calendars. Some nomadic cultures develop sophisticated astronomical knowledge, rivaling that of settled civilizations. Encoding this knowledge in stories, songs, and ritual practices that preserve information across generations. Navigation also involves reading more subtle environmental cues. In many regions, prevailing winds blow consistently from particular directions, and plant growth shows directional bias. Trees may lean slightly away from prevailing winds, or moss may grow preferentially on the north side of trees in the northern hemisphere, where the tail, north side, receives less direct sunlight. Sand dunes form in predictable orientations relative to wind direction, providing navigational information in deserts. Snow accumulation patterns on mountains, the flow direction of streams, and the orientation of ridgelines all provide directional cues to observant navigators. Chapter 9. Cooperation, Kinship, and Social Survival. A lone human in a harsh environment is fragile, vulnerable, and unlikely to survive long. But humans in groups become something different: cooperative, resilient, capable of accomplishing tasks impossible for individuals. The social nature of humanity is not incidental to our success in harsh climates. It is fundamental. The ability to cooperate, share resources, transmit knowledge, and support one another through difficult times represents perhaps our species' greatest survival advantage. Understanding how nomadic groups organize themselves socially, how they manage cooperation and resolve conflicts, and how they maintain social bonds, despite the stresses of nomadic life, reveals essential insights into human nature and our conquest of Earth's harshest environments. Nomadic groups are typically small, ranging from perhaps 20 to 70 individuals. This size range is not arbitrary. It reflects fundamental constraints on human social organization. Groups much smaller than 20 lack the diversity of skills, the labor power, and the genetic diversity needed for long-term viability. Groups much larger than 70 strain the social bonds that hold them together. Human social cognition seems optimized for tracking relationships and social standing within groups of roughly 50 to 150 individuals, a range that appears repeatedly across human societies, and that may reflect evolved cognitive limitations. Nomadic groups tend toward the smaller end of this range because mobility is more difficult with larger groups and because harsh environments often cannot support high population densities. Within these groups, every individual matters. In a group of 30 people, the loss of a skilled hunter, an experienced elder, or a healthy young adult significantly impacts the group's survival chances. This creates strong incentives for cooperation and mutual care. Nomadic groups develop sophisticated mechanisms for sharing resources, particularly food. Hunting large game yields far more meat than a single family can consume before spoilage, creating both opportunity and obligation to share. Most nomadic cultures develop strong sharing norms. Successful hunters are expected to distribute meat to the entire group, with specific rules governing how meat is divided. These sharing systems ensure that everyone eats when food is available, building social obligations and credit that can be called upon during future scarcity. Kin relationships structure much of nomadic social organization. Extended families, grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, cousins form the core of most groups. Kin cooperation makes evolutionary sense. Helping relatives succeed helps propagate shared genes. But nomadic groups also incorporate non-kin through marriage, adoption, and voluntary association. These connections create alliances between families and groups, establishing networks that spread across vast territories. When a group faces disaster, disease, hunting failure, conflict with neighbors, these networks provide crucial support. Relatives in neighboring groups can offer refuge, share resources, or provide warriors for defense. Marriage patterns in nomadic societies typically involve exchange between groups. A woman from one group marries into another, creating kinship ties that bind the groups together. Alternatively, bride exchange systems have two groups regularly trading marriage partners, maintaining balanced relationships. These intergroup marriages serve multiple functions. They create peace and cooperation between potentially rival groups. They prevent inbreeding by introducing genetic diversity. They establish trading relationships and mutual obligations. The negotiation of marriages is therefore not just personal but political, affecting the strategic position and security of entire groups. Decision-making in nomadic groups tends to be relatively egalitarian compared to settled societies. There are leaders, individuals whose age, experience, skill, or personal qualities give them influence, but these leaders typically cannot command absolute obedience. Instead, they lead by persuasion, example, and consensus building. Group decisions about where to move, when to hunt, how to respond to threats are made through discussion among adults, particularly experienced hunters and elders. This egalitarian structure makes sense for small groups where everyone knows everyone else, where cooperation is essential, and where leaders cannot effectively coerce compliance because dissatisfied. Members can simply leave and join another group. However, egalitarianism does not mean perfect equality. Status distinctions exist based on age, gender, skill, and personal achievement. Elders command respect for their knowledge and experience. Successful hunters gain prestige and influence. Some individuals possess specialized knowledge, shamanic powers, exceptional tracking ability, detailed geographic knowledge that gives them special standing. Gender roles are typically well-defined, with men primarily responsible for hunting large game and women for gathering plant foods, processing hides, caring for children, and often fishing and hunting small game. These divisions are flexible rather than rigid, and individuals who excel at traditionally opposite gender tasks are generally accommodated. The harsh environments that nomadic groups occupy create situations where difficult decisions must be made. When food runs short, who eats first? When the group must move quickly, what happens to those who cannot keep pace? When resources are insufficient to support everyone, how are survival chances allocated? Different societies answer these questions differently, but some patterns appear repeatedly. Children and pregnant or nursing mothers often receive priority in food distribution. They represent the group's future and require adequate nutrition. Productive adults who hunt, gather, and maintain the group's material culture also receive priority. Elders may receive less food during severe scarcity, and in some societies, elderly individuals who become unable to travel may be left behind with supplies to await death, a practice that seems cruel by modern standards, but makes tragic sense in contexts where the alternative is the death of the entire group. Conflict within groups poses serious threats to survival. When people live in close proximity, share scarce resources, and depend utterly on one another, the potential for disagreement, jealousy, and violence is ever present. Nomadic societies develop multiple mechanisms for managing conflict. Many have strong norms against violence within the group, with severe social sanctions or exile for those who breach these norms. Conflicts are often resolved through mediation by respected elders, through formalized negotiation procedures, or through ritual combat that allows grievances to be addressed without lethal violence. Some conflicts are resolved by fission. The group splits, with antagonistic families going separate ways. This solution works only when the environment can support multiple small groups and when existing social networks allow the splinter group to maintain necessary connections. Between-group conflict represents both threat and opportunity. Competition for territories, resources, or mates can lead to violence between nomadic groups. Archaeological evidence shows that intergroup violence has been part of human behavior for tens of thousands of years. Weapons designed for warfare, fortified camps, skeletal remains with trauma indicating conflict. However, the frequency and intensity of conflict varies enormously. In resource-rich environments with low population density, groups can avoid each other and conflict is rare. In resource-poor environments or when populations are dense, territorial conflicts become more common. Nomadic warfare, when it occurs, tends to be relatively small-scale raids and skirmishes rather than large battles, because groups are small and can not afford heavy casualties. But intergroup relationships are not purely competitive. Trade, intermarriage, and ceremonial gatherings create cooperative relationships that benefit all parties. Groups exchange goods that are locally abundant for items that are scarce. Coastal groups trade shells and dried fish for inland obsidian and furs. Mountain groups trade minerals for lowland plant products. These trading relationships are typically embedded in social relationships. Trade occurs between kin or ritualized trade, partners rather than in impersonal markets. Exchange serves social functions as much as economic ones. It maintains alliances, demonstrates wealth and generosity, and creates obligations that can be called upon in times of need. Periodic gatherings of multiple nomadic groups serve crucial social functions. These gatherings allow young people to meet potential marriage partners from outside their immediate group. They facilitate information exchange about resources, dangers, and opportunities across vast territories. They provide context for ritual activities that reinforce shared cultural identity and beliefs. They allow older children and adolescents to find mentors and apprenticeships beyond their own families. Archaeological sites showing evidence of large temporary camps suggest that such gatherings have occurred for thousands of years, bringing together hundreds or even thousands of people for brief periods of intensive social interaction. The transmission of knowledge from one generation to the next is perhaps the most crucial social function in nomadic societies. Unlike written cultures where knowledge can be stored in books, nomadic peoples must encode essential survival information in human memory and transmit it orally. This creates strong emphasis on teaching and learning. Children absorb knowledge constantly through observation and participation in adult activities. Formal teaching occurs through storytelling, demonstration of techniques, and supervised practice. The most important knowledge locations of water sources, animal behavior, tracking techniques, tool manufacture, food processing is taught redundantly by multiple adults to multiple children, ensuring that knowledge is not lost if individuals die unexpectedly. Stories serve as more than entertainment in nomadic cultures. They are educational technology. A story about ancestors who died because they ignored warning signs of a storm teaches both specific survival information and general wisdom about respecting nature. A story about a successful hunt encodes detailed information about animal behavior, tracking techniques, and hunting strategies. Stories about journeys describe routes, landmarks, and resources. The narrative format makes information memorable. The emotional content makes it engaging, and the social context of storytelling strengthens the bonds between teller and listeners. The most skilled storytellers become repositories of cultural knowledge, living libraries whose deaths represent significant losses. Music and ritual also serve social and survival functions. Group singing and dancing strengthen social bonds through synchronized activity that triggers release of endorphins and creates feelings of unity. Rituals mark important life transitions, birth, coming of age, marriage, death, providing structure and meaning to human experience. Some rituals have clear survival functions. Coming-of-age ceremonies often involve tests of skill that prepare adolescents for adult responsibilities. Healing rituals may incorporate genuine medicinal knowledge alongside spiritual elements. Weather magic, while not literally effective, may encode observations about weather, patterns, and optimal timing for seasonal activities. The care of children, elderly, and disabled individuals reveals much about nomadic social values. Children in nomadic societies grow up in close contact with adults of all ages, learning through immersion in adult activities. They enjoy considerable freedom, but also assume responsibilities appropriate to their age and ability. Elderly individuals who possess valuable knowledge remain active members of the group as long as they can contribute. Disabled individuals who can perform useful work tool-making, hide processing, child care, typically supported and integrated into group activities. This support is not purely altruistic. It reflects the recognition that everyone has value and that today's helper may be tomorrow's person needing help. The psychological benefits of strong social bonds should not be underestimated. Humans are intensely social creatures whose mental health depends on meaningful relationships. The close-knit nature of nomadic groups provides psychological security, reduces anxiety about survival, and gives life meaning through shared purpose and mutual support. The communal nature of nomadic life, eating together, sheltering together, working together, mourning together, creates a level of social intimacy that many modern people never experience. This social richness partially compensates for the material hardships of nomadic life in harsh environments. In the context of surviving extreme climates, social cooperation provides the crucial edge that allows humans to succeed where solitary animals of similar physical capabilities would perish. A lone human cannot effectively hunt large game, cannot maintain a continuous watch against predators, cannot survive illness or injury, and cannot raise children while simultaneously providing for all needs. But a cooperating group can accomplish all these tasks and more. Social organization multiplies human effectiveness, turning groups of individually vulnerable primates into the most formidable species Earth has ever produced. Chapter 10. Tools and Technology. The stone hand axe, carefully flaked from high-quality flint, represents hundreds of thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. Its symmetrical teardrop shape is not accidental, but precisely designed for multiple functions. The sharp edge cuts and scrapes. The pointed tip pierces and digs. The weight and balance allow it to be thrown or used for heavy chopping. Creating such a tool requires understanding stone fracture mechanics, recognizing quality raw materials, and mastering knapping techniques that take years to learn. But even more remarkably, this tool's design is essentially unchanged for over 1,000,000 years, passed down through countless generations with only minor regional variations. This conservatism speaks to the power of cultural transmission. Successful designs are carefully preserved and replicated. But it also raises questions. If humans are so innovative, why does stone tool technology remain relatively static for such vast periods? The answer reveals something profound about human technological evolution. For most of human prehistory, innovation is slow because the baseline of necessary knowledge is small. Populations are scattered, and successful techniques are jealously guarded rather than widely shared. A technological breakthrough in one group may never spread to others. An innovation may be lost when a group perishes, or when the few individuals who possess the knowledge die before teaching others. The pace of innovation accelerates dramatically only when populations grow larger, groups interact more frequently, and cultural mechanisms develop for preserving and transmitting knowledge. The real technological revolution is not any single invention, but the gradual development of systems for innovation itself, ways of preserving discoveries, testing improvements, and spreading successful techniques across populations. Stone tools are the most visible technology of prehistoric nomads because stone survives when organic materials decay. The archaeological record shows a progression from simple flaked stones to increasingly sophisticated tool types: hand axes, scrapers, points, blades, microliths. Each represents refinement of technique and understanding of stone properties. But this visible progression understates the full scope of technological development because most nomadic technology leaves no trace. Wooden spears rot away, leather clothing decays, rope and cordage disappear, plant-based containers disintegrate. When occasional waterlogged or frozen sites preserve these organic materials, we glimpse a technological sophistication that must have been typical but is usually invisible. The toolkit of a successful nomadic group in a harsh climate includes dozens of distinct tool types, each optimized for specific tasks. Stone blades for butchering meat, scrapers for processing hides, awls for punching holes in leather, needles for sewing, drills for making holes in bone and wood, knives for cutting plant materials, hammerstones for cracking nuts and bones, grinding stones for processing seeds and pigments. This proliferation of specialized tools reflects increasingly refined understanding of task requirements and material properties. Where early humans used general-purpose tools for multiple tasks, later nomads developed specialized implements that perform specific functions more efficiently. Tool manufacture itself requires tools, a concept that seems obvious but represents a cognitive leap. The stone hammer used to strike flakes from a core is itself a tool, as is the antler baton used to apply control pressure for fine flaking. The wooden vise that holds a drill steady is a tool for making tools. This recursion, using tools to make tools, accelerates technological development by allowing each generation to build on previous accomplishments. The apprentice learning tool-making doesn't start from scratch but inherits techniques, designs, and even the tools used to make tools, allowing focus on refinement and innovation rather than reinventing basics. Hafting, attaching stone points to wooden handles, represents a major technological achievement that dramatically increases tool effectiveness. A stone scraper held in the hand is useful but awkward and risks injury. The same scraper hafted to a wooden handle becomes much more effective. Leverage is improved, force is amplified, and the user's hand is protected. Hafting requires multiple component technologies: cordage or sinew for binding, adhesives from plant resins or animal glue, notches or grooves in wood to receive stone elements, understanding of how to arrange components for maximum strength and durability. Archaeological evidence shows hafting dating back at least 300,000 years, with increasing sophistication over time. Composite tools, implements made from multiple materials combined to create something no single material could achieve, mark another innovation threshold. The bow and arrow, appearing around 70,000 years ago in Africa and developing independently in multiple regions, combines wood, stone, sinew, cordage, and adhesive into a hunting weapon far superior to thrown spears. The bow requires understanding of wood properties. Different woods have different flexibility and strength. String tension: too tight and the bow breaks. Too loose and it doesn't shoot effectively. And arrow design: balance, weight, and fletching all affect flight. Creating a functional bow requires experimentation, refinement, and accumulated knowledge passed down through generations. The atlatl, or spear thrower, appearing in some regions around 30,000 years ago, represents a similar technological leap. This device extends the human arm, increasing leverage and dramatically boosting spear velocity and penetration. The physics involved are complex, but the practical result is clear. An atlatl-launched spear can kill game that would survive or escape from a hand-thrown weapon. Yet the atlatl is mechanically simple, essentially a stick with a hook, demonstrating that powerful innovations need not be complex. The insight to create an arm extension and the knowledge to refine its design for optimal performance represent the valuable innovation. Fire technology advances beyond simple fire creation and maintenance. Nomads learn to create different types of fires for different purposes. Hot, fast-burning fires for cooking, slow smoldering fires for smoking meat. contained fires for heating shelters without filling them with smoke. They developed techniques for fire-hardening wooden points, heat-treating stone to improve flaking properties, creating charcoal for specialized burning, and using fire to hollow logs for canoes. Fire becomes not just a source of warmth, but a versatile tool that enables countless other technologies. Food processing technologies directly impact survival in harsh climates. Drying meat preserves it for months. Rendering fat creates calorie-dense storage food. Smoking fish inhibits bacterial growth and extends shelf life. Fermenting plant materials make some foods digestible that would otherwise be toxic or nutritionally inaccessible. Each processing technique requires specific knowledge: the right temperature and humidity for drying, proper smoke generation for preservation, understanding of fermentation processes. These techniques represent chemical engineering developed through trial and error over thousands of years, allowing nomads to buffer themselves against seasonal scarcity by preserving abundance for lean times. Hide processing represents another complex technological suite. A raw animal hide is stiff, vulnerable to rot, and unappealing. Transformed into leather through careful processing, it becomes soft, durable, and valuable. The processing involves multiple steps: cleaning away fat and tissue, treating with tannins or other chemicals to prevent decay, softening through mechanical working, smoking to make the leather water-resistant. Different hides require different treatments. Thin rabbit skin needs delicate handling. Thick buffalo hide requires aggressive processing. Master hide workers can produce leather of remarkable quality, soft, strong, and beautiful, using entirely natural materials and hand tools. Cordage, rope, string, thread enables countless other technologies, but is itself a sophisticated product. Creating strong cordage from plant fibers requires extracting fibers from stems, leaves, or bark, processing them to remove non-fiber material, and twisting or braiding them into continuous lengths. Different plants yield different fiber qualities. Some are strong but stiff, others are flexible but weak, some resist rot better than others. Nomads learn which plants work best for different purposes. Fine thread for sewing, thicker cordage for lashing, heavy rope for hauling. Without cordage, many essential technologies, nets, bows, sewn clothing, hafted tools, would be impossible. Containers represent yet another technological category essential for nomadic survival. Carrying water, storing food, transporting supplies, all require containers of various types. Nomads create containers from diverse materials: bark folded and stitched into boxes, leather sewn into bags, woven plant fibers formed into baskets, hollow gourds, carved wood, and eventually fired clay. Each material has advantages and limitations. Bark containers are waterproof but fragile. Leather is durable but can develop leaks. Baskets are strong and flexible but not watertight unless sealed. Clay is stable but heavy and breakable. The diversity of container technologies reflects both creative problem-solving and adaptation to locally available materials. The innovation process itself becomes gradually more systematic. Early innovation is largely accidental. Someone happens upon a better way to flake stone, a useful property of a plant, or an improved hafting technique. But over time, nomadic cultures develop more intentional innovation strategies. They experiment deliberately, trying variations to see what works better. They test materials systematically, learning properties through repeated trials. They observe closely, noticing patterns that suggest underlying principles. This proto-scientific approach accelerates technological development, though it remains informal and implicit rather than systematic and explicit. Trade networks spread innovations across vast distances. A new spear point design developed in one region appears hundreds of kilometers away within years or decades. A superior stone source becomes known to distant groups who travel to quarry the material. Techniques for processing a particular plant food spread to regions where that plant grows. This technological diffusion occurs through multiple mechanisms. Intermarriage brings individuals with different knowledge into new groups. Seasonal gatherings allow demonstration of techniques. Trade in finished goods allows reverse engineering of manufacturing methods. The result is that innovations spread far beyond their points of origin, benefiting people who never meet the original inventors. Yet technology transfer is not always smooth or complete. Some innovations fail to spread because they require locally unavailable materials. Others depend on knowledge that cannot be easily communicated or demonstrated. Still others are deliberately guarded by groups who view technical knowledge as proprietary. Some technologies spread initially, but are then lost when key practitioners die before fully training successors. The history of technology in nomadic societies is not a simple story of linear progress, but a complex tapestry of innovation, diffusion, loss, and reinvention. The cumulative nature of technology means that later nomadic groups inherit a rich toolkit of inherited knowledge. A young person learning tool-making in 10,000 BCE inherits techniques refined over hundreds of thousands of years. They learn from accomplished practitioners who themselves learned from masters. This transmission of accumulated knowledge allows rapid skill acquisition. What took early humans millennia to discover can be taught to apprentices in years. This acceleration of learning through cultural transmission is perhaps humanity's greatest technological advantage, allowing each generation to stand on the accomplishments of all previous generations. In harsh climates, superior technology directly translates to survival advantage. Better clothing means better cold tolerance. More efficient tools mean less energy expended on essential tasks. Improved hunting technology increases food acquisition success. Better food preservation reduces vulnerability to seasonal scarcity. The groups with the best technology, and crucially, with the best systems for preserving and transmitting technological knowledge, survive and flourish, while less capable groups struggle or perish. Natural selection operates not just on genetic traits, but on cultural ones, favoring groups that innovate, share knowledge, and preserve their technological heritage. Chapter 11. Climate Change, Adaptation, and the Future. The last 2.5 million years of Earth's history have been characterized by dramatic climate instability. Massive ice sheets advance and retreat in cycles lasting roughly 100,000 years, with periods of extreme cold punctuated by briefer warm intervals. Sea levels rise and fall by over 100 meters as water locks in ice or returns to the oceans. Entire biomes shift across continents. Forests become grasslands, grasslands become deserts, and coastlines submerge or emerge. For the nomadic peoples who live through these transformations, adaptation is not optional. It is existential. The humans who survive are those who can adjust their strategies, technologies, and territories as the climate shifts. Climate change is not a future threat for these peoples. It is the perpetual reality they must navigate. The pace of climate change varies. Some transitions occur over millennia, slow enough that nomadic groups can adjust their territories gradually, following familiar resources as they shift latitude or elevation. During the last glacial maximum, roughly 20,000 years ago, ice sheets reach their greatest extent and global temperatures plummet. Humans in Europe hunker down in southern Refugia, Spain, Italy, the Balkans, where conditions remain tolerable. As the climate warms and ice retreats over subsequent millennia, these populations expand northward, recolonizing territories that had been under ice. This reconify is not a deliberate migration, but a gradual expansion. Each generation moves slightly north, following game herds, and finding new territories until humans once again inhabit Scandinavia, northern Russia, and other previously glaciated regions. But some climate changes are rapid and catastrophic. Volcanic eruptions can lower global temperatures within months, creating years of harsh conditions and crop failures. The Younger Dryas event, around 12,800 years ago, sees temperatures plunge suddenly after a period of warming, possibly triggered by the collapse of ice sheets disrupting ocean currents. This event, lasting roughly 1,300 years, reverses the warming trend and forces human populations to cope with renewed harsh conditions. Some populations adapt. Others perish or are absorbed into more successful groups. The archaeological record shows cultural discontinuities during this period, suggesting that some groups failed to survive the renewed cold. The nomadic lifestyle itself provides inherent resilience to climate change. Unlike settled agricultural societies tied to specific territories and crops, nomadic groups can move when conditions deteriorate. If drought makes one region uninhabitable, they shift to wetter areas. If cold advances from the north, they migrate south. This mobility is both a survival strategy and a way of life. Nomads do not invest heavily in permanent structures, fixed fields, or immobile property. Their wealth is portable: knowledge, tools, animals, social relationships. This mobility allows rapid response to environmental change. However, mobility has limits. Nomadic territories are not infinite. Neighboring groups occupy adjacent lands, and conflict arises when climate refugees encroach on already occupied territories. Moreover, some environmental changes are so extreme that no local movement suffices. When the Sahara transitions from green savanna to hyper-arid desert around 5,000 years ago, the inhabitants cannot simply move within the region. They must leave entirely or develop entirely new survival strategies suited to true desert conditions. Some populations abandon the Sahara, moving to the Nile Valley or sub-Saharan regions. Others adapt, becoming the desert nomads who master the water-finding and animal-herding techniques necessary for Saharan survival. Both responses require tremendous adaptive capacity and willingness to transform entire ways of life. Climate change also creates opportunities. As ice sheets retreat at the end of the Ice Age, vast new territories become available for colonization. The mammoth steppes of Siberia, previously too cold and harsh for permanent occupation, warm enough to support larger human populations. The flooding of the Bering Land Bridge around 11,000 years ago occurs after humans have already crossed into the Americas. But the warming climate makes North and South America increasingly hospitable, allowing rapid population expansion. Within just a few thousand years, humans spread from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego, adapting to every environment the Americas offer: Arctic tundra, temperate forests, grasslands, tropical rainforests, mountains, and deserts. The end of the Ice Age, around 11,700 years ago, marks the beginning of the Holocene, the current geological epoch characterized by relatively stable warm conditions. This stability proves transformative for human societies. With less climate variability, resources become more predictable, supporting larger, more sedentary populations. In several regions independently, the Fertile Crescent, China, Mesoamerica, the Andes, Sub-Saharan Africa, and New Guinea, humans begin domesticating plants and animals, transitioning from nomadic hunting and gathering to settled agriculture. This agricultural revolution fundamentally changes human society, eventually leading to cities, states, writing, and all the trappings of what we call civilization. Yet not all humans abandon nomadism. In regions unsuited to agriculture, deserts, tundra, mountains, certain grasslands, nomadic lifestyles persist. Pastoral nomadism develops in grasslands and semi-arid regions where herding domestic animals proves more productive than cultivation. These pastoral nomads, the Mongols of Central Asia, the Bedouin of Arabia, the Maasai of East Africa, the Sami of northern Scandinavia, maintain mobile lifestyles while participating in trade and interaction with agricultural societies. They occupy the marginal lands that farmers cannot use, creating a symbiotic relationship where nomads provide animal products, labor, and military service while receiving grain, manufactured goods, and market access from settled peoples. Hunter-gatherer nomadism also persists in regions where agriculture never takes hold or where hunting and gathering remains more productive than farming. The Aboriginal Australians maintain nomadic lifestyles for over 65,000 years, developing one of the world's longest-lasting continuous cultures. The Inuit of the Arctic, the San of southern Africa's Kalahari Desert, the various Amazonian groups, and many others continue hunting and gathering into the modern era, demonstrating that nomadism is not a primitive stage to be outgrown, but a viable, sophisticated adaptation to certain environments. The relationship between nomadic and settled peoples is complex and often contentious. Agricultural societies view nomads with mixture of fascination, fear, and contempt. Fascination with their freedom and skills, fear of their mobility and military capabilities, contempt for their lack of cities and written culture. Nomads often view settled peoples with corresponding ambivalence, appreciating their trade goods and agricultural products while disdaining their sedentary lives and political hierarchies. Throughout history, these two ways of life coexist in tension, sometimes cooperating through trade and intermarriage, sometimes conflicting violently over resources and territory. The military capabilities of nomadic peoples prove formidable throughout history. Nomads' mobility, hunting skills, hardiness, and egalitarian social structures that emphasize individual prowess make them dangerous opponents for settled armies. Nomadic warriors on horseback, the Scythians, Huns, Mongols, and others repeatedly conquer or threaten agricultural civilizations. The Mongol Empire, created by nomadic horsemen from the Central Asian steppes, becomes the largest contiguous land empire in history, stretching from Korea to Hungary. Only the development of firearms and industrial technology eventually shifts military advantage definitively towards settled states, ending the era when nomadic peoples could challenge civilizations militarily. In the modern era, nomadic lifestyles face unprecedented pressure. National borders restrict movement across territories that nomadic groups have traversed for millennia. Governments often view nomads as problems to be solved, forcing settlement, sedentarization, and integration into national economies. Private property systems and agricultural expansion eliminate the common shared lands that nomadic groups traditionally used. Global climate change, driven by industrial civilization, alters environments faster than nomadic peoples can adapt, threatening the resource bases that their lifestyles depend upon. Introduced diseases, disruption of traditional social systems, and loss of cultural knowledge all threaten the viability of remaining nomadic cultures. Yet nomadic peoples persist, adapting once again to changed circumstances. Some groups combine nomadic and settled lifestyles, maintaining seasonal movements while also keeping permanent homes. Others adopt new technologies, motorized vehicles, GPS, mobile phones that facilitate nomadic life in the modern world. Advocacy for indigenous rights has secured protected territories for some groups, allowing continuation of traditional practices. Growing recognition of traditional ecological knowledge has highlighted the sophistication of nomadic resource management, challenging assumptions that nomadism is primitive or unsustainable. The lessons from nomadic survival in harsh climates remain relevant today. As modern civilization confronts its own climate crisis, the adaptive strategies developed by nomadic peoples offer insights. Flexibility rather than rigid systems, mobility rather than fixed infrastructure, diversified resource use rather than dependence on single crops or resources, emphasis on accumulated knowledge and social cooperation rather than pure technological solutions. The resilience that allowed nomadic groups to survive ice ages, droughts, and dramatic environmental transformations may provide models for how humanity can navigate the climate challenges ahead. The story of how nomads survived Earth's harshest climates is ultimately a story about human potential. We are not the strongest, fastest, or most physically impressive species. We lack the natural adaptations, thick fur, sharp claws, specialized digestive systems that allow other animals to thrive in extreme environments. What we possess instead is adaptability, the capacity to learn, innovate, cooperate, and transmit knowledge across generations. These capabilities allowed our ancestors to spread across the planet, mastering every environment Earth offers. They developed technologies, strategies, and social systems that transformed vulnerable tropical primates into a species that could survive and thrive anywhere from Arctic ice to scorching deserts, from high mountains to open oceans. The nomadic peoples who conquered harsh climates did so not through single brilliant innovations, but through accumulation of countless small improvements over countless generations. Each generation inherited the knowledge of ancestors, tested it against experience, refined what worked, and passed the improved version to descendants. This process, cultural evolution, operates much faster than biological evolution, allowing humans to adapt to new environments within hundreds or thousands of years rather than millions. The speed and flexibility of cultural adaptation is our species' defining characteristic, the trait that explains our unprecedented success. Looking forward, humanity faces environmental challenges that would be familiar to our nomadic ancestors: climate instability, resource scarcity, the need to adapt to changing conditions. We possess advantages they lacked: scientific understanding, advanced technology, global communication, but we also face disadvantages. Our populations are vast and growing, our resource consumption is unsustainable, and our social systems are rigid and slow to change. The settled, agricultural, industrial way of life that has dominated for the past 10,000 years may prove less resilient to rapid environmental change than the nomadic lifestyle that sustained humanity for hundreds of thousands of years before that. The solution is not to abandon modernity and return to nomadism that is neither possible nor desirable for billions of people. Rather, we must rediscover the adaptive mindset that characterized successful nomadic peoples, viewing change as normal rather than catastrophic, maintaining flexibility in strategies and systems, valuing accumulated knowledge and wisdom, cooperating across groups and generations, and recognizing that survival depends on working with natural systems rather than trying to dominate them. These principles, refined through hundreds of thousands of years of nomadic survival in harsh climates, remain valid guides for navigating an uncertain future. The journey we have traced across continents and millennia reveals a profound truth about human nature. We are creatures defined not by our environment, but by our response to it. Where other species adapt biologically over millions of years, developing fur for cold or humps for water storage, humans adapt culturally within generations, creating clothing for cold and containers for water. This cultural adaptation, swift, flexible, and cumulative, is the secret that allowed our ancestors to survive and thrive in Earth's harshest climates. The first nomads who left Africa around 70,000 years ago carried with them a modest technological toolkit: stone tools, fire, basic clothing, and language. But they also carried something more valuable: the capacity to learn, innovate, and share knowledge. As they encountered new environments, the frozen steppes of Ice Age Europe, the waterless deserts of Arabia and Central Asia, the thin air of mountain plateaus, the vast emptiness of the ocean, they developed solutions. They created sophisticated clothing systems that rivaled modern cold weather gear. They developed water-finding techniques that made survival possible in true deserts. They mastered high-altitude physiology through both genetic and cultural adaptation. They learned to navigate across featureless landscapes using stars, landmarks, and environmental cues. Each of these adaptations required not just individual genius, a collective effort sustained across generations. The best hunting techniques, the most efficient shelter designs, the most reliable navigation methods all emerged through trial and error. Success and tragedy, careful observation, and systematic transmission of knowledge. The elders who taught children where to find water in the desert, the master craftspeople who demonstrated proper tool-making techniques, the storytellers who encoded survival information in memorable narratives. These individuals were as important to human survival as any technology or tool. Social cooperation proved equally essential. Humans in harsh environments cannot survive alone. We succeed through sharing resources, coordinating activities, caring for vulnerable members, and maintaining networks that span vast territories. The egalitarian social structures, elaborate kinship systems, and strong sharing norms that characterize nomadic societies are not quaint cultural traditions, but survival technologies as important as fire or clothing. They allow humans to buffer against individual misfortune, accumulate and preserve knowledge, and accomplish tasks impossible for lone individuals. The technological innovations developed by nomadic peoples laid foundations for all subsequent human achievement. Fire mastery, clothing manufacture, food preservation, shelter construction, tool making, navigation, hunting techniques all have roots in the nomadic past. Even agriculture and civilization, which eventually replaced nomadism in most regions, built upon knowledge and capabilities developed during hundreds of thousands of years of nomadic existence. Bung. The selective pressures of surviving harsh climates shape not just our technologies, but our cognitive abilities, social behaviors, and cultural practices in ways that persist to the present. Yet for all their achievements, nomadic peoples remain largely invisible in popular understanding of history. The story of civilization focuses on cities, monuments, and written records, all products of settled societies. Nomads, leaving little permanent architecture and no written records, fade from view despite their enormous historical importance. Their story is one of constant adaptation, incredible hardship, and remarkable triumph against overwhelming environmental odds. It deserves to be told and remembered. Today, as modern civilization confronts climate change and environmental degradation, the adaptive strategies of nomadic peoples offer more than historical interest. They provide practical lessons. The flexibility, resilience, and sustainability that characterize successful nomadic societies may guide our own responses to environmental challenges. The deep ecological knowledge, sophisticated resource management, and emphasis on long-term thinking that allowed nomads to survive for millennia in harsh environments contrast sharply with the short-term exploitation and environmental destruction that characterize much of modern development. The nomadic heritage lives on in human genetics, psychology, and behavior. Our capacity for endurance running, our ability to process diverse diets, our sophisticated social intelligence, our fascination with landscapes and movement all reflect our nomadic past. Even in settled, urban contexts, humans retain the adaptive flexibility and innovative capacity that allowed our ancestors to conquer the planet. Understanding where these capabilities came from and how they were refined in the crucible of harsh climates helps us understand who we are as a species. The question posed at the beginning, how did the first nomads survive Earth's harshest climates, has no single answer. They survived through fire and clothing, through tracking and navigation, through cooperation and knowledge transmission, through technology and innovation. They survived through flexibility and determination, through careful observation and creative problem solving. They survived because they were and we remain the most adaptable species Earth has ever produced. That adaptability, forged in ice and desert, in mountains and oceans, in the crucible of extreme survival challenges, is humanity's greatest inheritance from our nomadic ancestors. It sustained them through conditions that would kill us today in hours. and it may yet sustain us through the environmental challenges that lie ahead.